Today's passage causes us to ask the question: how many times should you let someone try to kill you with a spear before you say, you know what, that's enough, no more? 1 Samuel chapter 19. And in this chapter, we see that the relationship between Saul and David is deteriorating quickly. Saul is being driven insane with his jealousy and his envy of David. He can't stand that David is having so much victory in battle and that he's being celebrated above Saul himself. But I think one of the other main driving forces of his jealousy here is that he knows David is pleasing God. He knows that David has God's favor, and Saul remembers and knows that he has failed to trust in the Lord and that he's been rejected, and he feels threatened by David. And in the beginning of this chapter, we see Saul make up his mind that he wants David dead. He's already tried to kill David, but now he's telling his men and the people under him that they need to kill David. And we see Saul's son, Jonathan, speak some biblical wisdom into Saul's life at the very beginning of this chapter. He says something that may sound simple. He reminds Saul of just how sinful what he's getting ready to do is. He says, you're actually trying to kill the man who has God's favor and who God is using to deliver Israel. And even though that does sound like a simple thing, shouldn't Saul have realized just how wrong what he was doing was? I think Saul had gotten into a place where he was so blinded by his envy that he felt completely justified in what he was doing. He wasn't thinking about what pleased God. And we see that Jonathan actually wakes Saul up here and gets him to examine himself and see how sinful what he's getting ready to do is, and he relents. He decides that he's not going to try to kill David. Of course, it doesn't last long because he just gets envious again after David goes out and has victory, and he tries to kill him again when he's in the middle of his rage or whatever. And so I think the difference that we're going to see continue to develop between David and Saul is that David takes God's word and God's law seriously. David does not want to become guilty of breaking God's law. He wants to walk in biblical wisdom. And we really are guilty when we break God's law. That's why it's so serious. It's not just that we feel guilty and we have these feelings of shame. We are guilty of breaking God's law. And we certainly, like Saul, can get into a place where we're blinded by other things, by other motivations, and we think that we are justified in the way that we're acting. Hopefully, we have somebody like Jonathan who can speak truth into our lives and get us to consider, are we seeking to please God first? Is what we're doing honoring Him? Is it living in obedience to His law? Or are we ignoring that and trying to bend a situation into a way that we think will be the outcome will be better for us? In the end of this chapter, we see how useless it is for Saul to fight against God. He goes to try to kill David, and he ends up prophesying and spending the day humbled before God, worshiping and prophesying for God. David, in the end, is going to let God take care of this problem for him. Saul is going to continue to fight and find out just how useless it is. And so I guess the lesson of this chapter is, let's seek not to be thick-headed like Saul, thinking that we can fight against God and what he says is right, but instead let's seek to submit to his law and his will for our lives.